Hello and welcome to my first installment of my Essays Read Aloud series. I'm going to start with my first essay, also my most viewed essay, A Call to Action and an Appeal to Heaven, America at War with Itself. This was published back in April of this year, 2021. And I'll provide a little bit of commentary as we go through and see how things have changed since I'm recording this now in August. Prior to the election, then-candidate Biden hosted a website describing his policy positions. A thorough reading revealed the use of the word equity dozens of times, often in successive sentences, in broad and varied contexts, appearing on every page and under every policy. Climate policies, equity. Criminal justice reform, equity. American agriculture, equity. This same thorough reading would discover the word equality appearing not once. And again, this is to draw a contrast between equality and equity. Equality meaning equality of opportunity, meaning the government stays out of your way and keeps other people out of your way. Equity being the government gets involved and redistributes shares in order to effect an equal outcome. In other words, equity is the socialization of outcome. Upon the Biden-Harris administration entering office, the entirety of the executive branch has begun reorientation toward this goal of equity. Every executive agency, branch, the DoD and military now sports equity officers, rather enforcers, in the name of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer, or some such derivation of newspeak. It is the responsibility of these political officers to toe the party line, to create an environment of suspicion, a perpetual sword of Damocles overhead with which to build out behavioral control mechanisms. You now likely have these commissars in your own organizations hoisting pointy objects over your own heads, and this is even more true today than it was back in April when I wrote it. The spread of wokeism throughout corporate America, these new ESG, environmental, social, and governmental scoring systems being enforced by major capital such as BlackRock, this is all really shaking out how I predicted. The American founding, as understood by those involved with the Declaration of Independence, the Revolutionary War, Constitutional Convention, the adoption of the Bill of Rights, and as documented in the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers, elevated equality as a bedrock principle on which to build this nation. All men are created equal was the rallying cry of a people intent on creating the first country on earth based not on ethnic, but on ethic considerations. This equality was understood in a uniquely post-Reformation Christian sense, in that mere existence does not guarantee salvation. Salvation is a gift to be received or rejected with the full measure of agency of the individual implicated in their own fate. Hence, the equality referenced by the founders was that of equal opportunity, as salvation is equally available but for the taking, and the role of government was to ensure no entity, be it individual, corporate, or state, transgressed against a citizen, such as to impose barriers to or burdens on that opportunity, and to punish transgressors and thereby establish deterrence against such artificial barriers to equality. It was not believed to be the role of government to intervene at any point, as if God, to the benefit of one man over another. In other words, the point of government is not to benefit one person. It is to prevent one person from encumbering another person unduly by imposing barriers to their success. These educated, principled men were not so stupid as to think any two could ever be equal in all things. No two are exact copies of each other in size, shape, intellect, nor personality, and as such not a single man present would have expected any two to have exactly equal outcomes. We are not equal in gifts, nor in proclivities for sin. It was expected that each would provide for himself and his own through his own productivity for the betterment of society through the unencumbered, mutually beneficial trade of goods and services. This was in accordance with natural law, man toiling, as God exclaimed upon banishment from Eden. This was also in accordance with the objective reality that not for one's own efforts, one does not eat. And just to clarify, that last one is a paraphrasing of Lenin, which is a bit ironic in this. In the immediate aftermath of the American founding, a new set of ideas emerged based in religious practices predating the Reformation and completely separate from Christendom. It was within the alchemy of the Dark Ages that these new ideas took root. Whereas Christian Reformation and early Enlightenment thought presuppose an objective reality based on things as they truly exist, specifically that of a corrupted and imperfect world after the fall. These new ideas presupposed an inevitable and deterministic march toward progress ending in utopia. This was the philosophy underpinning Hegel's dialectical process of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Technically that's not Hegel, technically that's Kant. Hegel put it a bit differently, concrete and such. This dialectical method of expediting the resolution of societal contradictions was as religious in its application as was its prophesied end. Perfect harmony of citizen with state, the resultant redundancy and therefore collapse of the state coercive apparatus, and entrance into the utopian age as the absolute spirit, a sort of metaphysical zeitgeist, is actualized as a social deity. In other words, in Hegelian interpretation that the young Hegelians took, once all contradictions of society were worked out, the collective consciousness of all of society, all of mankind, would actually become a god of sorts, as it realized its own existence, self-actualized, and then there would be a period of judgment and the utopia, and this is where the funny phrase, automated luxury socialism, comes into play. It actually is a concept from the religious side of this, where in the utopia there you don't have to work, you don't have to labor, you don't have to toil. It's all creative, it's all fun, it's all nice, and it's very much a religious concept. Moving on. This is a religion whose rise was aided heavily by both acute and chronic heavy metal intoxication and excessive use of cocaine. And of course, this is a reference to the alchemical origins of this, and alchemy often involved the ingestion of heavy metals such as mercury, and also heavily incorporated later on the ideology of Freud. And of course, Freud is famous for prescribing his patients enough cocaine to kill a small horse. If the concept of the rise of the nebulous utopia resultant from human struggle sounds vaguely familiar, it's because Hegel's ideas formed the basis for communism, fascism, and progressivism, the founders of each being explicit avowed young Hegelians. This religion is called scientism, or translated more properly from Hegel's book, the science of understanding, capital S science. Though its primary religious text, Phenomenology of Spirit, has been largely lost to modern practitioners. Apologies here, but the brief lesson in comparative religions is necessary to understand where we are today. Appeals to America having Christian foundations should not be confused with an appeal for a religious tyranny, nor for a state church. That American values are based in a Christian tradition is a fact, and verifiably so right up until the rewriting or banishment of those particular books. Historically, there have been very many ethics wholly separate from the Christian ethic. Many societies were organized around principles totally foreign to us, yet to those in such societies it is our ethic that would appear foreign, as their individual psychology is organized around their own social ethic. These different ethics represent more than just a difference of opinion. They represent the difference between equal protections under law and the right of a particular ethnic group to rape, pillage, and murder their way through another ethnic group. Members of such societies do not participate in such activities unwillingly, nor with reservation, but with the zeal of the righteous, because that is what they believe is good. People are not basically good. People are what they believe. Vladimir Lenin described the Marxist ethic as ruthless, and mercy as a sin against the party. This ethic is merely the logical conclusion of Marxist thought, wherein all people are viewed at any given moment as either wholly victim or wholly villain. From Stalin to Pol Pot, from Che to Castro, Marxists have always followed in the pattern of Lenin, and they killed around 100 million people in the last century in extraordinarily ugly ways, all in the name of equity. Several years ago, an inept attempt was made to overthrow the government of Turkey and its iron-fisted ruler, Recep Erdogan. The incompetence of this attempt is not at issue, nor is the worthiness of the cause. But what is important is that you likely watched this event unfold on CNN, or read about it in the New York Times. You probably saw the helicopter circling and dropping hand grenades, or the soldiers running amok, or the tanks shutting down major choke points on highways. Such are the images of revolution in the minds of citizenry. Notably not among this imagery is doddering elderly men, appeals to unity, or nice tweets. I implore you to adjust your perspective, as over the course of the last few months the Second American Revolution has already unfolded. There were no helicopters, no hand grenades, and the only soldiers were those of security theater. Yet between the pledges of bipartisanship, absent stares, and incessant televised signing of documents, the fundamental nature of American government has been altered. No longer does it exist to secure the individual rights of Americans, with arms if necessary. It now exists to utilize the full powers of the state, including those arms, to foist equity upon us all. This is all done in the name of the Hegelian religion of scientism, now often just called progressivism or popularly misconstrued as liberalism, utilizing the political weapons of political warfare developed by Marxists, resulting in an unholy alliance of the state with corporations against Americans that can only be correctly called fascism. From Benito Mussolini, fascism should more properly be called corporatism, because it is the merger of state and corporate power. It is now not the Christians, but the progressives who are religious zealots implementing a Hegelian, fascistic state church of scientism. Hence the oft-heard and entirely ascientific statement of faith, believe science. This wasn't obvious, as the nature of this revolution is top-down. It is the elites seizing the rightful political power of the citizenry with a stroke of a pen. There needn't be a popular uprising, nor televised firefights, and no input from you is required nor desired. Your sovereignty is null and void. Welcome to the divine right of the bureaucratic technocracy and the tyranny of the experts. Are you enjoying your consensus as science and science as religion society yet? Do not confuse the prior dive into philosophy as marking this essay as one of mere curiosity. It is not. This is a call to action, a plea to understand what time it is, and an appeal to heaven. Of course, that being a reference to the appeal to heaven Revolutionary War days. Surveys all indicate that Americans know something is wrong, though most seemingly cannot name it. So allow me. War. We are now in a state of civil war. This war is, currently, in the spheres of information, law, economics, and politics, with occasional spillover of shots fired and persistent, less lethal paramilitary agitation. It will not stay this way for long, and indeed it hasn't. A sober, Rational assessment indicates that every single one of the horrors of the 20th century is now a reasonably probable outcome for our current calamitous circumstances. Political prisoners, re-education camps, gulags, genocide, famine, sustained low-intensity conflict, terrorism, cartel-controlled territory, warlords, tribal race war, hyperinflation, and world war are all now on offer. This is not a drill. We may still be on the tail end of a narrowing window in time in which both the ongoing revolution might be stymied and the war prevented from ever going hot and entering the kinetic sphere. However, we may not do what is necessary to stop this because what is necessary is hard, and we are soft. To the citizens and voters reading this, know that now is not the time to advance policy or to stand on principle. We are at war, and we need generals, not politicians. What I mean by this is quit clinging to your individual preferences of what you think needs to be done in a political context, because we're not in a political context. We are in a political war context. To the politicians reading this, either lead, follow, or get out of the way right now. This isn't the time for careerism, horse trading, nor partisan politics, and if you prevent an effective political warfare strategy from being adopted, you will forever be known by any surviving resistance as the spineless maggots of men who feasted on the corpse of our republic as it burned. I ask you now to look at the clock. Look long and look hard. It is time for a counter-revolution. Do it with words, politics, information, economics, law, and do it with every ounce you can muster. Do it before you have to do it with fists, feet, iron, and fire. Do it before America is a vision of hell, pockmarked by IED blasts. Do it before they steal our remaining liberty, seize your children, and call you kulak. Do it before you and I share the same large grave. Do it now. And I think this has held up pretty well over the last 4 months since I published this originally. For those of you keeping up with our current circumstances, you know that very much of this has progressed to a much later stage. And we will get into that as I begin reading later in the series some of my more recent essays. Thank you for listening.